Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's virtual executive roundtable, where we come together and share perspective, connection, and encouragement. So each week, as I mentioned, to give you some quick context, during this time, I kind of looked around and said, well, is there anything that I could be doing differently? And I said, well, gosh, I have a network. I feel like I have a kind of a unique perspective, and other people have this kind of perspective also of seeing multiple businesses, and having close relationships with these executives. And so can we somehow pool that perspective together? Can we somehow say, well, if you see all these businesses, is that something that I can offer? And then draw on other people who have that kind of perch or that kind of view of relationship to other businesses and bring them in as well. So that's the model. So we'll look to offer our perspective. We'll have a little bit of a almost talk show style with our co-host, who I'll introduce here in just a minute. We'll have connection with really everybody, attendees and panelists and everybody on the Zoom as well. And then we'll have encouragement. You may just find encouragement from hearing an idea or from something specifically. Someone actually encourages you and tells you, hey, you can do it, or go do this. Or also I've mentioned a couple times, and just want to clarify how we'll do. I want to offer prayer as well. I know not everyone on the call is Christian, but I want to offer that prayer. That's just something that's really important to me. I know everybody at some time, regardless of your faith, might want prayer. And so I'm going to pray for everybody on the call, but if you have any specific prayer requests, anytime, please let me know. And if anyone, I know we also do have a lot of believers on the Zoom as well. If anyone wants to join me in praying for the group, let me know. All right, let's go on. So here's what we're going to focus on. We can talk about a lot of things. We can just sort of all let everybody just chat. And I was talking with a friend, and he said this. And so here's where we're going to try to focus our discussion. What are you thinking, and what are you doing? Okay, so we're going to share your perspective. What are you thinking? You can cite your sources if you want. And then what are you doing? And how are you acting on that? And we'll also have a hot topic. So today's hot topic is going to be really tied to our co-host and his passion, and is going to be how to fully engage your peer advisory network. And so you might be thinking, well, what do you mean by peer advisory network? Or you might start having an idea. Well, to me, that means something. And so we'll cover that. Like I said, we have a co-host joining us, and I want to go ahead and introduce him. So Don Glacy is our co-host, and actually, Don, I'm going to quit sharing for just a minute. And is there, Don, can you just say hello and let your camera light up there for a minute?
Yeah, can you not see me?
Yeah, we can see you now. You just had to speak,
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, hello. You want me to do like a quick intro, Ryan?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll introduce you, and feel free to correct anything I messed up or fill in any gaps or whatever. Does that work?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, great. Well, let me start with just how we met. So I was fortunate enough to meet Don at our co-working office. And you meet a lot of folks in an environment like that, but Don and I were able to spend some time together. We became fast friends, had shared values. I was really impressed with Don, and he's a pretty young guy, as you can see on the screen there, but he's accomplished a lot. He got started in business at a very young age. If you look at his bio on his LinkedIn profile, he shares a lot of this, and how his mom is a single mom and really hardworking. And so he got introduced to the business world at a really young age. He actually started and sold his first business at the age of 19, which is pretty cool. And then he was the youngest rather, Vistage member. Is that right, Don? The youngest at age 25 when you joined?
That's right, in California. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
I was born in Texas. I was born in Texas, but raised in California. Don't hold that against me.
You came back as soon as you could, right?
Absolutely.
So that was just 2 years ago. He's 27. No, I'm kidding. So he's the youngest. And then after all these years in Vistage, he was encouraged and saw that he was a really good fit to become a Vistage chair also. And so for those, we'll talk more about Vistage a little bit. It's not going to be a Vistage sales pitch, but it's kind of related to the topic. So for those of you who don't know, Vistage is one of the premier global CEO peer groups is what a lot of people would call it. I think Don will have a different term for it, but it's this concept of a peer advisory group. You know, it's lonely at the top, and a lot of CEOs like to interact with each other. And Vistage is like I said, one of the premier ones that has a model that helps people engage in a really valuable way. Again, Don, feel free to put that in your own words. But one of the things I really like about Don, and why I'm not surprised that he's just a natural coach. He's someone who absorbs information. He's read a lot. He's constantly citing, you can see some books behind him, but he's constantly citing books that he's read. I'm sure he's reading a lot more of them digitally nowadays. And he's one of those people who can draw on those and apply them. And he interacts with so many other business executives. He's also been successful at running his own marketing agency. And so as a Vistage chair now, I'm really happy for his members. They get to benefit from all his wisdom, even at such a young age. And so you've got to be one of the top 3 youngest chairs, if not the youngest chair also. I think maybe the youngest in Texas or something like that also, aren't you?
Second youngest by 2 months. I was a little upset about that, but definitely youngest in DFW. That other guy's down in San Antonio.
Okay, good. I hope he doesn't find you.
Oh, it took him 6 years to launch, so.
And here you are, in no time. Well, welcome, Don. Thanks so much for being our co-host this morning. Anything you want to add to your introduction?
Yeah, if you haven't picked up on it already, I'm slightly competitive. My life sports are tennis, water polo, which is, again, California. I had to explain to a lot of folks, it's not, they don't put horses in the water. It's, you know, people with a ball and throwing. But yeah, slightly competitive. But yeah, I'll just say that, you know, outside of that, the family business was a full service ad agency. So I have a heavy bent towards marketing as it relates to the mind of the consumer. I took the agency my mother built in California at about 10 million, merged that up, and now it's about 55, running out of the Bay Area in California with a pretty standout team. And we skew more behavioral economics. We like to get in the mind of people to help market and sell things. Well, that, I think, gave me a real strong advantage as I move into this new world of chairing. Being a member through Vistage for 10 years and then having an exit in my business, Vistage asked me to become a chair. I tried to convince them I didn't have enough gray hairs. And they said, you know, see, just you know, bear with us. And they hooked me for sure. And I just have found a passion in helping people. And the topic for today, like Ryan said, isn't really a why Vistage. I just find it to be the most powerful tool for executives and business leaders. It takes a lot of different forms and a lot of different networks. But I think what I found is that business owners, particularly founders, kind of go head first and wake up one day and realize that, oh, shoot, you know, where am I? Or, you know, have found blind spots that they wish they could have rectified much earlier. And for myself, I had a distinct advantage, like Ryan said, going into business so young and having to take over a $10 million company at 25 years old. I was fortunate enough to have a mentor that referred me into a peer advisory group, and then a mother that would fund that effort so that I could get equipped. Now, that was my own context. But what I wanted to do is just, there's a lot of, I guess, people don't even know, like when I say peer advisory group, that means so many different things to so many different people, or it's just, what are you talking about, is kind of a response I get. And Ryan, you started off on some of the kind of the high notes, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And in not knowing everybody and everybody's context in the room, I think we're going to go to a poll here in a second. So by way of just wrapping up the bio, you know, real marketing focus. My education was in information systems and statistics. I built a lot of tech companies. My last one, we had 82 people working completely remote. So this particular environment would not have been new to us. That's actually how I met Ryan, is I decided to go get myself a co-working space for a few of my local staff, but really as a place for me, because I have found that I function best when I have people sharpening me. And it's just, I've found that co-working environment is a really interesting place to meet entrepreneurial minded folks. So outside of that, I've summited 2 mountains, Rainier and Whitney, mountaineer routes, if anybody's into extreme climbing and possible death. That's a fun one. Yeah, I have these businesses that fund my passion, which is raising my 4 kids with my wife here in Texas, and we attend Countryside Bible Church. So that's me.
Cool.
Where do you want to go next, bud?
Thank you. Yeah, let me actually just set up a couple other quick things, and I'm sure our folks are really eager to hear from you. So let me, I'm just going to share. I mentioned, so we have the hot topic. I'm sharing my screen now. Introduce Don as our co-host. I just want to remind you, we have really kind of 2 roles. You can be a panelist, you can be an attendee, and this is a Zoom webinar, a little different than a lot of you might be used to. So the attendees, your cameras aren't on. We're not going to turn them on. You can raise your hand if you want to ask. You can also ask through Q&A. You can ask any of the panelists, and we'll try to keep an eye on that. Panelists, if you wouldn't mind. And then I have kind of friends of the firm, some trusted folks to really act as panelists and help. I'll remind you also as panelists, if you wouldn't mind keeping your microphone on mute unless you have something you want to share. But we're going to do a little kind of talk show with Don first, and then we'll make it more interactive. We want to hear from you guys, and we'll do that through polls. We'll also do it, like as I already said, through the Q&A. You can ask us questions. We'll respond back that way. And we're going to do a pass the mic toward the end, and I'll either ask if anybody has anything they want to share, or I might just call on some folks to share their story. Again, what are you thinking? What are you doing? And I'll remind you again, but when we do that, be sure to just tell real quickly who you are, a sentence or 2 about what your business does, just to give everybody some context. And here is the URL. I will actually, if somebody could just send that out for me on the chat, I'd really appreciate it. We'll go to it here in just a second, and it'll be on the screen too when we go to it. But to open things up, I see it looks like somebody already chatted it. Thank you. To open things up, we are going to do what we've been doing, and we've just added one more category. So we've been asking in these 4 categories, which one are you? And so would love for you to go ahead. In the top corner, you see the website to go to. The instructions will be on the next screen also. But which one works for you? So either are you in crisis mode, alarms blaring, every day is firefighting. There are people who are still in that mode. Others are in this hunkered down mode where that firefighting is a little bit in the past, and they have the plan. They've kind of battened down the hatches, right? And they're sort of weathering the storm. Others are pivoting, as we were working our way around the circle here, pivoting, and that can look like a lot of different things, but just in this climate, really doing something different. Okay, whoops, I bumped the slides, excuse me. So, and then I added one, which is emerging. Okay, look at this. So we do have some people who are brave enough already emerging. That's amazing. I wasn't sure we'd have anybody yet who's saying, yes, I'm emerging, but I think we have some really optimistic folks. A lot of entrepreneurs are optimistic, so that's awesome. I hope we get to dive into this a little bit, but continue. You can see the instructions on the top for anybody, on the top of my screen for anybody who hasn't been able to figure out how to get in. You can text it from your phone. You can do whatever. You can get on a browser and get in that way. So Don, as these are continuing to come in, probably most of them are in at this point, but there may be some others piling in. Any thoughts or reactions so far as we see the responses? Oh, Don, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
You'll find, so if those of you familiar with the disc profile, I don't show up like it all the time, but I'm a C, which means I'm an analyst. And in the profile says moves at a glacial pace. So if I'm not talking, it might be the processor warming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is it's actually really positive. So I've kind of seen this type of pull happen in a lot of different contexts over the last 6 weeks, and I'm seeing it move more and more to this makeup of kind of forward. I'll call it maybe forward thinking, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's really striking to me is there's no hunkered down unless we just haven't heard from y'all yet. Yeah. And there's no crisis. I mean, a week ago, we had those in here. And 2 weeks ago, we certainly did, right? I mean, almost, well, that's not true. In this group, we still had some of the more optimistic folks and, you know, I'm going to get through this and all that. But as you just sort of keep your thumb on the pulse of who's out there, there were definitely still people in major crisis. I mean, and that's one thing that I've noticed in crisis, things just move so quickly. So this is really cool to see. Thank you all for participating there. we'll move on unless, and feel free to refer back to this, anybody who wants to, and Don included, but let's go on. I know you had some cool stuff that you wanted to share. And this is the problem I had last week. We'll see if this works.
What's that?
This week. Yeah, I'm gonna have to stop my share. Hopefully I can do it here in just another second. It's just hanging up on the poll for some reason. So let's go on though. So I think the perspective of your peer advisory group, your peer advisory network, as you put it. So
yeah, and not mine, but any. I think the biggest thing that I've found to be a comfort to business leaders and executives, particularly in crises, is what I would call a peer advisor group, and that could take many different forms. I mean, some people just have a standing breakfast, with a handful of friends. Some people have one person they go to. I often point to some of the big business example people out there. Steve Jobs had Woz, right? Bill Gates had Balmer, and you can go down the list. There's always some kind of a tandem or group of folks that are kind of your brain trust that you go to that are truly peers. The challenge usually being a business owner is everybody wants something from you, right? You're either paying a payroll or a vendor, or you've got professionals, accountants, lawyers, whomever. But to some degree, you have to show up as the owner, which puts you in a certain context. And maybe you tend to be a little bit less transparent in those contexts, but also, do you really go to those audiences to get the feedback you really need, right? Not just, hey, help me make a vendor decision or something like that. But my business is on fire. How do I pivot? That's a very sensitive conversation to have. And if you don't have that, decisions can be rash. And I see this as the best tool that I've had, at least, to run and exit one company, build and sell off another. So I'm a little bit drinking of the Kool-Aid here, but what I found is that folks that put other like-minded, talented people around them and can get to this point of vulnerability, and that's really what it comes down to: is can you get trust in the room? Ryan mentioned I'm a book nerd. Tribal Leadership was a book that did a study across multiple high-performing businesses, and the probably the biggest component of high-performing teams is a trust environment where information flowed freely, as opposed to kind of the military compartmentalization, command and control type style of running a business, right? So I find that folks that are in those groups, particularly in a crisis moment, are quicker to adapt, right? Survival of the fittest isn't who's most strong, but those that are quick to pivot and adapt to their environment. Folks that have that kind of grounding in their groups are able to not just change, but change and move quickly. And that's something I'm kind of seeing from this room is we're already in high growth. We're already in pivot, and some even are taking a stab at, I think, emerging. Ryan is that entrepreneurial, hey, I'm going to start a new business in this crazy environment. Yeah.
I love it. Right.
Is that the right interpretation of emerging for you?
Yeah. In fact, I didn't even set it up. Some folks might have interpreted that differently, but yeah, that's definitely
sure.
And
so my talk kind of shifts depending on the room, and given that everybody's in high growth, I'm actually real interested to know some of the cases in the room and what growth means. So I'll start first by just sharing a story. One of my members. I'll give this as a general story of the power of a peer group. Very successful gal that runs a marketing training organization, has a couple other businesses, comes in, to a meeting, on a one-to-one coaching meeting, kind of, panicked about the situation. This was 6 weeks ago, saying, I need to slash this, slash that, slash this, slash that. And I said, hang on, let's talk about the business, what's going on. And of course, revenue forecast has gone this way. And she's about 10 times the size she was last year. And so she's panicked about it, being top heavy expense wise. Right. Part of another big profile thing that I find, we do lots of profiles, in my groups, but we do discs, strength finders, are kind of the go-to. I'm a big fan of Strengths Finders. They're kind of up in their game for those of you that haven't done that, for looking at your organization and finding out how to play to your people's strengths, particularly your direct reports. I definitely recommend that tool. One of my strengths is strategy and context. So I took her back to 08 because I know her business was 10 years old. And I said, well, hang on, this isn't the first crisis you've come across. How big were you? What was the difference? She was a $100,000 company back in 08. And she put all of her activities, knowing that revenue wasn't going to happen soon, she put all of her activities into growing her audience through social media, particularly Facebook groups.
Which was a pretty daring move, right, Don? And that was a pretty bold, yeah.
Yeah, it was a direct pivot to no money up front.
Yeah.
Yeah. But she knew it instinctively that she wasn't going to be able to generate revenue today, right? But she still had something of value for tomorrow. So what she did was she instead of going, a mile deep with each of her customers, she went to go to scale, what I say, she built the sail knowing that the winds were going to return. And she ended up 100xing her business over the course of the next 2 years because of that radical immediate pivot, right? She didn't sit there and be like, well, how do I get more money out of my existing customers to stay afloat, right? So once we had that conversation in that moment, you can see the relief kind of fall off, right? And this was a situation where she was triggered into fight or flight, right? We have this two brain system going on. This is me and my neuromarketing, side coming out of me. But we've got this, this neo thinking cortex around our limbic brain, and our limbic brain is all about keeping us alive, right? That's where we get our fight or flight responses. And when something dramatic happens where it changes the entire environment around us, limbic brain takes over in a lot of cases and we panic. That's not the case in this room. We're back to using our neocortex to think through things. But for her, she couldn't get past that. And it took a peer, in this case, a coach, to kind of bring her back to the facts, bring her back to what happened in 08 and 09 was your activity. And now she's taking her much larger platform, as a several $1 million company and staff, she's pivoting all of their activity to go back to the playbook that she already proved for herself, which is grow my audience, so that when the winds return, her sale again takes her into that next season. I've got other members that are pivoting to shorter sales cycle products and hiring sales staff right now. Right now, one of the unique benefits, I guess, if you want to call it that, is, we just exited one of the lowest unemployment periods in history. Talent was very difficult to get. Arguably, really good talent is still difficult to get. But people are going and finding unique ways of getting people to consider taking a leap that have the resources to do that. But all of these ideas, all these contexts, and all these stories I could share all are coming out of a specific context of owners talking to other owners, or executives talking to executives saying, how do I solve a particular problem, getting vulnerable and making it happen. So, and just like different forms of peer groups have existed for a long time. The name brand ones, the YPOs, the Vistages, there's C12, I think is another one. Ryan, Kingdom Business Leaders, I think is one. There's a lot of them in a lot of different contexts, and I'm kind of an open book. If any of y'all haven't already, experienced one of those, and they're different tools for different CEOs. I joined in my context because I was a brand new CEO and I needed equipping, right? I needed the knowledge component of it. Now, kind of having been 10 years into the deal, at the end of it, it was more, how do I get outside my own head and get other perspectives on a problem I'm looking to, solve for my organization? How do I take this new product to market and do that either with do I use direct sales force? Do I skew marketing? Do I, use a franchise model? Yada, yada. Yeah.
I think on that note, you're hitting on some of the reasons why having a network is so, whether it's a formal group or an informal group, being able to talk with other executives who can supply you with great advice and ideas, why it's so important. I boil it down to one word, which is acceleration. It's all about, okay, sure, I could have gone through all the options myself, and I might not have chosen the one that someone recommended, and it might have taken me longer to get to something good, to get to a good outcome. But with a network around, I can get more ideas, I can get faster ideas, and I can get to the outcome faster. And by the way, just a quick observation. Almost everybody, as I look around the grid here of folks, we have EO was one you didn't mention, represented also.
Yeah.
And then Charlie has his own network. He has his following. He's like a celebrity in Atlanta. So he has, and through High Tech Ministries, being a ministry, but it's also industry oriented. So that's a network, and he may be involved in others anyway. So there's good familiarity with a formalized network. I boil it down to acceleration. What do you think? Does that word resonate with you, or do you have another way of framing that?
I like acceleration. I like velocity too. Velocity is, another term we use. We try to achieve in the marketing world unit sales velocity for clients, right? We try to get the curve to do this, right? Acceleration, is more linear. Unit velocity though, right? We get to increase exponentially. Don't get me going on nerd stuff. I'll start going into statistics and we'll lose the room. Well,
I love it that so one thing we'll also do in these sessions for everyone's benefit is we're going to focus on specific use cases, right? We want to make this practical. We don't want theory is fine, but we want to actually hit on use cases as well and give you guys some advice and perspective and maybe some takeaways, which fortunately Don's already doing somewhat unprompted. So thank you for that. And let's go. We have one hand up. I'm going to just pause and see if anyone else has any questions. And then I think you wanted to also chat about the growth zone, Don. So maybe we can go to that here after we hear from the group. So first, why don't we go to Andrew McKinney. Oh, let me unmute you. And actually, you can turn on video if you want, but yeah, go ahead. I'll lower your hand.
Hey, so the question that I have is really around the limbic response or the limbic reaction, and what do you mean by that in regards to stress management and handling crises?
Yeah, great question. So Dan Miller, it was Speaker of the Year last year for Vistage. He has a great talk. He's a health and wellness guy, and he comes and talks to business executives to get better personal performance, right, out of you and your staff. And he's got a 6-point thing that starts with, in the highest priority is stress, and then sleep, and then water. Fitness and nutrition make it on the bottom half of the list, which is usually what people think about. But he goes there because, having kind of cognitive resilience is important, and the strength of your system relies a lot on how your stress state, right, and how much internal resources you have available, which a big function of that is your sleep cycles. So I'm going to try and stick to your answer though, but limbic response, as it relates to how I brought it up, one of the functions of that being fight or flight is a survival mechanism. But it's also how we usually make decisions. Coming from the marketing world, the way we go into organizations, like we did this with Aston Martin. They wanted to figure out, how do you sell an Aston Martin? Because all we've done is have James Bond drive it around for a few decades. And they never really advertised. And so they came to us and we did a quantitative research study around what is it about an Aston Martin that really triggers the limbic system? Because we will filter information through a sales pitch or whatever with our neocortex, but really at the end of the day, we're going to get resonance when they can get to our limbic system, which is kind of the old brain, alligator brain. These are some of the terms you might have heard. So when you're in a room, and I'll just go to marketing and sales for instance, as my closest for instance, but if people are in stress, it makes it much harder to get to their limbic state because they're on defense, right? They're ready to fight or get out of the room. And the biggest component to kind of counteract that is trust, right? Once they have trust, they feel safe. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, basically, right? So we were able to show through a process called ethnography. Most people that, you know, have watched Mad Men or, you know, have any interest in marketing think of focus groups. Those are not good because so many bias things show up. So ethnography.
Let's keep it practical. So I love, you got the theory, you're getting practical. Let's yeah, go ahead, Don.
Well, the point is, if you can understand how people make decisions and you can trigger their limbic system in an emotional way, that's how you're going to get the best response. Data, right? I'm not sitting here throwing a bunch of numbers. I'm sitting here telling stories because it's stories that we're going to resonate the most with as humans. You know, I like to say until robots are buying our products and services, humans still want to be approached by humans because there's something in the discourse and how we choose to make decisions about the person across the table. We want to do business with people we trust and trust that can have a benefit. So I don't know if I'm getting too off topic with your question there, Andrew, but
I think that was good.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
No, I think that was good. Good job. I think you answered his question. You gave that practical example with that client you're working with too. And I'll add a quick.
Wave the flag. You know, getting me to talk's not the problem. Keeping me on topic and getting me to shut up. You know, just wave that flag.
Great.
Really good.
Great. We also have Don Ship.
Hey, Ryan.
Yeah, Charlie.
What is the topic?
Yeah, so we talked about it is the making the most of your peer advisory network. So what we're talking about is, so why have one? We started on that a little bit. Why have we talked about acceleration, velocity, and then we're also gonna ask Don for some tips of how to make the most of our network. How do you, for those of a lot of us, like I said, most of the folks on the call are in a network already and get the general concept. Some aren't, I think, to my knowledge. And so I think at least for the folks who aren't in a network, maybe it would be valuable to explain to them how to expand their network. Even those who are in a formal network, you can always do better. But then I think a lot of focus on, so what can we do to get more out of our network and to give more into our, have that dynamic going. So Charlie, does that answer your question?
Yeah. So who is in our networks? Because if we just use the word network, then it means a lot of different things to different people, okay?
Yeah.
You know, just like I think Don here is saying, oh, it's the Vistage network or it's the EO network, you know? Well, those are, if the only network you engage is that network, you're going to get a prejudicial view, right? Of the way the world works, okay? Because they have the same thinking. Generally. So is there other networks? Are there other people outside of the typical business network that might be helpful for us to make better decisions and also to gain momentum?
Yeah, good question. Don?
Yeah, well, actually that triggered a thought that we had. We had a Vistage speaker come and talk to our groups once. And it was a really fascinating exercise. He said, you know, take out a piece of paper and write down all the different subcultures that you're a part of. And of course, we're like, what are you talking about? And he points to, you know, somebody in the room. Let's say he points to me and he says, okay, Don, where'd you go to school? Okay, Cal State Fullerton. That's a subculture. What sports do you play? Tennis, water polo, mountain climbing, right? Do you have kids? Are you married? Right? All these different things about you as a profile, you can go find externally as a group, right? So if you think of that in the sales and marketing sense, you can create real quick a list of sub-segments to go message to. In terms of peer advisory and getting input and unbiased or even new ideas, Charlie, I think the assumption to your question was, how do we not get stale in getting into this echo chamber that we create for ourselves?
The question was really around what are the different parts of a person's network, okay?
Sure.
So first to define what those are, as opposed to just, I gave an example on why it's important. I think it's important to talk about, get us thinking about what our network is. All right.
Yeah. And I think context is important.
Okay.
Yeah. I think context is important to defining what the network does for you and what it is for you. The topic of today, peer advisory groups, would be kind of the most close to you, and I've used the word trust or vulnerability a lot, is, you know, where do you go to get the most honest, candid feedback for you to make decisions as an executive? That's how I define a peer advisory network, right? Or a peer advisory group. That could be one person. It could be a room of, you know, 16 people if it's Vistage. Okay.
Yeah, but I think when you talk like that,
yeah.
though, I think, Don, I think the thing is again, it gets you down in this sort of group think kind of deal. For example, when you were talking to this young lady who had a business of $100,000 10 years ago, right, in revenue, you know, and here she is, she's thinking she needs to kind of shed everything, you know, cut her expenses, stay alive, and you're saying, slow down, slow down. Well, your view and the way you approach her and how you might help her is one way. One thing you don't know is you don't really know her market. And you're never going to know her market. I mean, she can describe it to you, but you don't know who they are. You don't know how they buy. You don't know what they're thinking right now. You don't know if they all ran to Montana and bought guns and huddled up. You don't know what's going on. So I need to talk to, part of my network is to talk to those customers, for example, that I do have a good relationship with, right? To 100%. Find out. So I'm saying is broaden it a bit. You know, beyond peer advisory, I think peer advisory is beneficial, but I think that there has to be some elements that come together that make for better decision making.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think so. As the host here, I think y'all are talking past each other a little bit. Let me jump in and just say, I think Don, Charlie, I think you're posing a great perspective, which is, hey, a variety of networks, and recognizing that I have different networks and I can interoperate with them in different ways. There's value in having multiple networks and working with them in that way. And Don started acknowledging that and saying, yeah, you have these subgroups, and he was mentioning that. So I think we might be just talking past each other. I think he's agreeing with you that it is good to have different networks. And I would suggest too that the group think, there's some real good value in that also, because we know the rules in the game and so for instance, with Vistage, they have issue processing. And that's one of the things that Vistage does really well. And they know, and for new people who come in and try to do issue processing, they sort of fumble through it and they don't necessarily get the value or as much value initially. And then once you have people who are really skilled in it, they get the value. Kingdom Business Leaders, the group I'm in, you know, we're lesson oriented. We pray together. It's faith-based. We have a way that we interact together that somebody just walking in would be different, differently. Senior Reed has his own group and they do network.
I think we are agreement that Don and I are in agreement. Okay. But I think what's important is you keep getting to, hey, we really need to get to application here. Okay. So what my question really is to the group, to everybody, to just say, okay, so who have you gone to during this time of uncertainty? Okay. In this time of crisis, who have you gone to that's within your network, and how did those conversations go, and how have they helped you?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Can we open that up, Ryan? I'd be interested in hearing that.
Yeah, let's do it. And let me just also, before we do, check the chat. We have a nice thread going in the chat as well. But yeah, y'all go ahead.
Ryan, I can jump in just from what I've been dealing with. I've got a group that developed called the Global Connect Group. It's not a market-facing group, but we've created a methodology, 9 pillars of business development collaboration. And one of the focuses, Charlie, to your point, is your network of influence. What is your network of influence? Everyone in the group has a network of influence, and trying to determine what that is, and LinkedIn, quite frankly, is a big help there, looking at everyone's first level connections out into the marketplace, and then gauging, what that is.
What level of influence?
Network
your network of influence, rather, I mean, to personalize it.
No, let me just finish, and I appreciate that. Network of influence is personal in that it is everybody's network of influence that's in the group is important. What is that network of influence? It can be family and friends. It can be community. It can be faith. It can be business, prospects, clients, service providers. Looking at that network of influence, to your good point, is really key. And there are groups that help with that, Vistage and others. The other big area is the community of influence, which is all the professional organizations and groups that the members are a part of, on boards, on committees. It's very robust. And if you look at that community of influence, most of those could be prospects, they could be clients, could be other. but it's a fascinating thing to look at is, to your point, all of the different groups that an individual in your group is a member of. So we have a methodology that we follow, and then strategic advisory is one of the pillars, which is really interesting in this situation where we've come together, just like Ryan has brought all of us together to talk about what's happening to us in this situation, and using the advisory of the group. None of the members are competitively positioned. So there's a perspective, a legal perspective, accounting perspective, marketing perspective, call center perspective, and then a global perspective. So not to go on, it's just, I think the key is that all these different groups have methodologies and tools and ways of addressing their members. And I like what you're saying, Charlie, the peer network is quite broad outside of one of these individual networks. So sorry, Ryan, I went on a little bit.
I think, having seen seniors approach before, one of the things I really like, and Charlie, hitting back on your point of having a kind of a variety of networks, or at least having a perspective of what are his methodology maps out your network. And when you're in the process of doing that, you don't realize you have more people. You mentioned water polo. Off the top of your head, you might name one or two people. But when you put thought to it and focus on it and map it out, you realize, oh, there are these 4 or 5 other people. And look, this person's actually in multiple networks. And so there's some real value in just having awareness of what is your network out there, or your multiple groups, or however you want to think of that. And what is the best way to interact with them to both give and get value.
Yeah, and one of the best tools lately that I've found really helpful for those of you that haven't played with LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which is kind of the back-end business function of LinkedIn. It's a paid system. It's a really cool way to start organizing networks, if you will, or lists of people around a certain context, whether it's seniority levels or industries or job titles, right? From a practical application. But I agree, Charlie, like going at customers as a networker is super important to have kind of the ear of the customer. That Aston Martin example that I was giving is our whole quantitative research firm at the agency was all around how do you listen to your customer, because your customer will give you the feedback you really need about your product and your service. The context is different though. I don't know that as a business owner, I'd go to my customer and be like, hey, we're bleeding cash. How should we turn this thing around, right? or whatever. Context, right? Context.
I don't think that when you go to your customer, it's not about you. You're going to your customer and finding out about them. So I'm not going to say I'm bleeding cash.
Yeah. But it's different context.
I said, man, we're here to serve you. I wonder what you guys are up to. What are you thinking? Where are you spending your money these days? Mm-hmm. I ain't spending anything anywhere. I go to Kroger and that's it. Okay. That's good to know. When do you think you'll do something different? Can I talk to you next week?
Yeah, and I think that's the point, is to have awareness of, even within customers, you can have a customer advisory board, which I've helped clients put together, and you talk to them differently than you talk to the masses. You do give them a little look behind the curtain, and you may actually tell them we're bleeding. It depends. In certain, you have to know the context, but you certainly wouldn't tell everybody else. So anyway, let's see. There was somebody, Don.
I will mention too, there is a difference, and I want to draw a contrast here against. There's trade groups that have a homogenous industry of executives coming together. Like in automotive, we're heavy into automotive historically. That's where our agency got started. And they have something called 20 groups where, dealers, like 20 Toyota general managers, owners will fly into a central location once a quarter, and they'll share financials and best practices and all these things. That's good in certain contexts, right? Versus something like a Vistage where you get heterogeneous industries. By design, those groups can't have two of the same industry in one room, so that you get this kind of multi-looks at the perspectives. So I want to make sure I make that contrast. Yeah.
That balance. Hey, Don Ship. Okay, I see Don Ship raised his hand, and then you put it down. You put your thoughts in the chat. Thank you, around the limbic brain and stuff. That's really cool. Thank you. Let's see. Ben, you have your hand up.
Cool. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Don. You got a lot of great perspectives. For me, and I'm curious to hear kind of, in your Vistage group, how people are thinking about this too. For me, strategically, I'm making a list of the difficulties I'm having right now, what hurdles I need to jump over that I'm having difficulty jumping over, and then going out and trying to find people that have been there before and done it. And I'm agnostic to the network, whether it's Vistage, LinkedIn, if it's my brother, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Fast track my growth to speak with someone who has been there and done that before. And even though no one put on here that they're in this state of crisis, I looked up the crisis definition. I think when you look at it from a definition standpoint, we're all in crisis. It's a time when a difficult or important decision must be made. We're all in crisis right now, right? We've got to make some really important decisions, some difficult decisions. Some people are in this time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. But for me, that's the kind of the playbook I've always reverted back to is I've never been here before. I don't know how to do it. And I'm just going to find somebody and put that out into the universe of, hey, has anyone ever experienced this? You know, and in my own journey, very similar to the woman that you spoke about, I started, and I'll talk about this next week, leading the roundtable, is I started my business in 2008 and got my SBA loan 2 weeks before Lehman Brothers collapsed.
Wow.
And there's a bunch of other context to that story that makes it even more difficult. So I've put myself out there to people too. If you're in crisis, come talk to me, right? Because I've been there before. I know how to navigate it, at least how I've navigated it. So that's just my approach, is trying to find someone that has run a distribution company, sold PPE, raised a bunch of money, gone through the PPP program, you know, have 50 plus employees, 100 plus employees like I do. And I think that's the power of, you know, the Vistage group or any of these other groups, right? Is you're bound to find someone that has been through what you've already been through before.
Yeah, and I think to Charlie's network, thinking beyond, or to Charlie's point too, thinking beyond just a formal group too. Who else can you reach out to? Is there anybody who has that kind of relevant experience or perspective?
Right.
Yeah, really cool.
I
Good.
think that's very important.
Yeah.
Congratulations,
Well,
by the way. You know,
You know,
having
very
gone
impressive.
through that period of time and started a business.
Thanks, man.
That's impressive. Yeah, you're a valuable resource to a lot of people right now. So kudos for you putting yourself out there.
Yeah, but I think it's more, I think what I've heard from you, Ben, is something that we rarely do, okay? And that you seem to do just very naturally, all right? And that is you get transparent early, okay? You're not afraid to say, look, I've never been here before. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, all right? I need help, all right? When somebody does that, there isn't any shortage of people who will come and help. But instead, as business leaders and owners, what we do is we think we have to huddle up, go in a cave, analyze it all, and then come out with an answer, okay? Yeah. And the fact that you know, although you said, I put myself out there, you put yourself out there to help, but you also put yourself out there for help, all right? So that transparency that you have is what helps make you successful, and you will be crazy successful because of this one thing that you do. That's how you build network. That's meaningful network. So thanks for sharing that, Ben.
And that's really cool. I don't know that I've heard the word yet, but normally in a conversation with Don or with Ben or with Charlie, you hear the word leader or leadership, and with a lot of the other people on that Zoom too, that comes, and that's, to me, that's really what you're talking about. And that's a leadership style. There's a way of being transparent that that just makes you a better leader. I mean, you know, obviously you do it a certain way.
Yeah. There's a good book. There's a good book for, again, one of these neuromarketing things, but there's a good book called The Like Switch, L-I-K-E. And it's a FBI counterintelligence officer that breaks down into a formula how to earn people's trust. Not, you know, sometimes manipulatively. In his situation, he's trying to, convert spies within foreign governments to spy on their government for our behalf. He's like, talk about a hard sales pitch, right? And the last and most powerful component of his formula is intensity. How intense of a conversation can you have with somebody? And that'll be the kind of the litmus test of how much trust there is. Well, and leading to Charlie's point about you, Ben, leading with transparency, brings people's walls down, I think. And they see, you run the risk, right? Emotionally, our pride stands in the way and wants us to act like we've got it all together. But if you can circumvent that and lead with the transparency, you earn a lot of trust. And I think to Charlie's point, set yourself up to be the recipient of a lot of knowledge and success in a lot of ways.
Well, guys, just watching the clock. We have 10 minutes left. Hey, Tim, real quick, we have 10 minutes left. So just watching the clock, it sounds like you have something. Maybe you can add as we do the round robin. I just want to offer the mic to anybody who wants to share. What are you thinking? What are you doing? Either just, in this climate, something you're doing in your business, or related to this network of your peer, your peer network. Tim, was that kind of on topic with where you were headed? You can go ahead.
Well, I wanted to piggyback to what Ben and Charlie really talked about a lot. Years ago, when I was involved in healthcare, we had many different payment systems that developed during the career I had in healthcare. The last one was changing from a cost basis of doing business to a competitive environment, PPO contracts and the like. And when we confronted that, most healthcare executives in those days had never been trained to work in an environment that involved marketing, competing for contracts, and so forth. So one of the things that we did in the organization I was associated with was we made a very concerted effort to study other industries totally outside of healthcare who had actually had to deal with a dramatic change in their environment. And for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, I kind of had a lack of respect, if you will, for healthcare executives being able to do that just based on their background and training and so forth. And the second thing was to actually get our position established on the basis of what other companies had done in the marketplace. So it's a great value to reach out to totally disassociated enterprises to include them in helping you transition your business.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Tim. I love the examples. And you reminded me, I got to witness the example Don was talking about, the gal in his network that, we've been referring to. There was somebody else who was struggling, and she offered a perspective to say, hey, have you thought about this? And he just had never thought about it. It was actually specifically, the idea was, you used to do events.
A guy whose business has gone to zero because of this crisis, she gave him $1 million idea how to pivot.
Yeah.
Literally. She had seen somebody else in the same business make this pivot, make $1 million.
And I love it because this guy's pretty accomplished, and he just went, wow, no, I hadn't thought of that. She needed him, or he needed her rather, just hand him the idea.
But it took him getting to a trusted room to say, hey, I need help, right?
Asking for help.
Yeah.
So we're seeing some keys here, right? Of giving help and asking for help. I love it.
I'll say this too, kind of as a comment that dovetails with this and with Ben's comment. When you go and you say I need help around something, the power is how you frame the question. You can see on this whiteboard, maybe, I don't know if you can read that. How do I, right? You'd be surprised how many executives have the hardest time articulating what it is they actually need help with. And so the first step in the concatenated Vistage process and every other coaching process I've seen is how do you get, the better you can ask your question, Ben, or anybody else that would go to somebody, that frames the content that you'll receive and the value of what you'll receive. Yeah.
I remember the first lunch we went to, Don Glazy. I was sharing with him something, and I thought I had asked him a question. And full disclosure, I was kind of embarrassed. And his response was, "So what's your question for me?" It's like you actually didn't ask me a question. So what do you want from me? How can I help? So he's helping me frame the question. So he's really good at that. All right, hey Ben, I see your hands up, and I just want to give you're going to be our co-host next week, and you've already contributed so much. Let me just give everybody else real quick a chance. We can come back to you if we don't have anybody else. Anybody else want to share? What are you thinking? What are you doing?
I've got something quick that I'll share.
Don Ship?
I think that there's two wings on the plane here.
Can't quite hear you, Don. Can you speak up? I'm not sure. Is it just me, guys?
Not hear me?
Yeah, a little louder, please, Don.
Can't hear it. Maybe switch mics.
This.
Yeah, much better.
That's much
Okay. So just real quickly, there's two wings to the airplane here. I know that everybody's working really hard to get clarity, to understand what you need to do and why. And I think peer groups is a great way to to get that clarity. One of the things that we're really focusing on right now that I want to bring up is that you have to communicate. Remember that you've got a team that has, I mean, unless you're a solopreneur, you've got a team, they have none of the control, they have none of the power, they don't have any of the data. Whatever communicating you're doing, I would encourage you to do more. One of the things I'm really pleased with is that on a weekly basis, we say, hey, in these uncertain times, we want you to know what we're doing and why. So,
and hey, Don, real quick, a sentence or two. Again, what is it you do for the group?
Thank you. Yeah, my name's Don Ship. I'm a vice president of IT for WebCE. It's a continuing education company that trains professionals on how to get licensed and stay licensed in various industries across the United States.
Yeah, thanks, Don.
So we've got several good peer groups. I heard some good things here today, but that's one of the things that I would really encourage you to do is focus on getting clear on what you're going to do. Be clear on why. I think there's a lot of good conversations that are going to lead in that direction. Make sure that you're communicating in clear terms to those who, if you want engaged employees, if you want to drive down fear, they have their own limbic responses that are happening right now. So if you want thriving to occur, it's not just what happens in the tower where we're figuring things out. It's where the boots on the ground are. We need to get their frontal cortexes involved and turn off their limbic systems so that we can thrive together.
Yeah, I love it, Don. I think when things are operating well, we kind of have a dashboard. We sort of have the control room, and we can operate a lot, not entirely, but from that control room, if you will, or that dashboard, you still got to be out walking around and engaging with customers and your employees and everything. But especially in crisis, it's so much more important. You can almost leave the control room. You need to get out there. And the data you're getting from the control panel probably isn't that good anyway at that point because you're in crisis. This doesn't compare to the benchmarks for sure. Hey, we have a few minutes. Let me just wrap this real quick, but I want to stay on. Ben, you have your hand up, so I want to hear, maybe everybody else wants to stay in here. But real quick, I just want to say thank you all very much. Don Glacy, thank you for being our co-host, offering your wisdom and perspective. Next week, we'll have Ben Davis as our co-host. So he's already been pretty vocal here this morning. So y'all are familiar with Ben. And but what he didn't mention, at least in this roundtable, is that he's the founder of the Gents Place, which is where I get my haircut. This haircut is not from the Gents Place. This was a self job.
It's a Corona cut.
Yeah, the Corona cut. There are a couple butcher spots you can't see on the camera. I made do anyway, so I can get back in when you're open for business. So we're excited to hear from you next week. Some great perspective to offer. Look forward to seeing y'all then. We have a couple minutes left. Why don't we, I'll just go back out. Ben, since your hand was raised, do you have anything you wanted to ask or share?
I do not like to talk at all, by the way, guys.
Yeah, I know.
Well, Don mentioned vulnerability at the very beginning, and I had an experience that has stuck with me for many, many years, and you probably won't mind me mentioning his name. He's not on the call anyway, but a good friend of mine, Nick Kennedy, who started a private aviation company called Rise here in Dallas and sold it successfully. He was in one of my locations 5 years ago when he was starting the business, and I have a little meeting room in that location, and we were sitting down, we're talking about him starting his business, and it was really crazy, and he had raised all of this money. And I was asking him these questions about, well, how are you navigating this? How are you working this out? I haven't done that before. I'm trying to do this. And he leaned into me and he's like, Ben, let's be honest. Neither one of us know what the F we're doing right now, do we? We're entrepreneurs. We're making this shit up as we go. But we've got to go back to our teams, back to the war because we're the general, and act like we do. So he said, you and I can have these conversations all day long and strategize and everything else, but don't let your teams know that we don't know what the F we're doing. And so that was my little peer advisory group at that time, was me and Nick, him going through his startup and raising all this money, never doing it before, and me trying to start my franchise business and get Jerry Jones to invest and Emmett Smith to invest, never having, have these types of partners. And that was my little peer advisory group. And it was a relationship based on ultimate vulnerability and transparency and authenticity. And I'll never forget that moment. I've shared that with so many other entrepreneurs, is like, look, man, we don't know what we're doing, but let's figure it out. And the more that we share and the more we're vulnerable, the faster we will figure that out. So I just wanted to share that because so many people got this armor on them. And I remember being like that 10 years ago. And the more I've developed really deep relationships with entrepreneurs, the more I've realized that armor is actually could be pretty harmful to growing your business.
It's pretty heavy to carry around, right?
Great
Hey,
point.
great closing thought. We're just 1 minute over on time, so I want to make sure I wrap. I will be the one to stay on and turn off the lights though, so feel free to stay if you want to chat, but I want to make sure I call a close here on time. Thank you all so much. We'll look for you next week when Ben is our co-host. Let me know if you have anybody else in mind, or if you think you might want to be a co-host, or anybody else in mind. Don Glacy, thank you again so much, and we'll see y'all soon.